Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse, and in today's segment I want to discuss with you the top 5 injuries that folks are likely to incur during a poop hits the fan scenario. I shall enumerate them for you and then we will go back and expand upon them. The first is sprains, the second is burns, third is cuts/lacerations, fourth is rashes, and fifth is/are falls. Okay, so let's go over each one of these and explain why they're more likely to happen, what we can do to prep for them, and what we can do about them. So sprains. First off, the core assumption that we have here in a long-term grid down scenario is that because the grid will be down, or because electricity will be in shorter supply, manual labor is likely to increase, okay? Now, the problem that we run into is that manual labor is increasing in this case, in the United States certainly, in a population that is used to being sedentary, right, for a lot of the times. And a lot of people, you know, when stuff gets rough, they're going to find themselves not in such good shape. Sprains, especially like of the wrist, elbow, ankles, especially if people are doing more walking, toting of water, food, etc. It's going to be more likely that they're going to tear these tissues, okay, that are anchoring bones and muscles in places, okay. A sprain is fairly easily treatable. The protocol has changed. It used to be like rest, ice compression, elevation. Bottom line, with sprains, we just need to make sure that we have the ability to support the like the ankle or the wrist or the elbow, whatever joint it is that is in question here. We need to be able to support it. We also need to be able to control pain and discomfort on the part of the person and eventually work back up to a full range of motion and re-strengthen it, okay? The second one is burns, and this is something that we really need to pay attention to, especially with your children. Burns. Why would we be more likely to incur burns during a poop hits the fan scenario? Well, if you're cooking on fires or cooking on wood stoves or basically cooking in a manner that you're not normally used to, that's going to increase your likelihood for injury first off. But cooking in a manner that we're, number one, not used to, and then two, a manner that is more likely to cause damage, right? Open fires, open flames, really hot, like cast iron, cooking with cast iron, just, you know, by mistake, picking something up that's really hot with your hand, the glove slips off, your pot holder slips off, you burn something here, you reach into an oven and you burn your tummy. Or I had a really good friend, a pregnant lady, and she still has a scar on her belly to this day because her belly was so big. You know, she reached into the oven to grab something, she slid the oven rack out and it burned her, you know, because her belly was right there. She wasn't used to that proprioception of, oh, hello belly, you are at risk for burns. No, but seriously, the burn is something that we really need to pay attention to. And of course, there are different categories of severity with burns, all right? There are different types of burns. You have chemical burns, radiation type burns, like being in the sun, okay? And then also thermal burns, you know, from like touching something that is heated up. What are some of the things we can do to prepare for this? What are some things we can store? Definitely aloe is nice. And I'm not talking about the stuff in the gel, I'm talking about the actual plant. That's really nice for thermal burns and also for radiation burns, you know, being out in the sun. But also, you need to keep in mind that whenever you have a pretty substantial burn, like with a child, if they put their hand on something hot, like a stove eye, God forbid, when you have burns on certain parts of the body, it really compromises the skin integrity. It compromises the person's ability to maintain hydration. When you're talking about large surface area burns, like God forbid somebody fell into a fire, or well, IEDs are another example of this. Not that we would necessarily be dealing with that in a poop hits the fan scenario. The larger the surface area, the more likely the person is going to have a lot of imbalances in their hydration status, but also you're going to have to pay attention to their protein. So keep this in mind. If you have someone who, God forbid, you know, ends up getting a burn, you're going to have to increase their protein intake, okay? Because it takes a lot of energy for the body, and I would add nutrients for the body to remanufacture cells. Think about it this way. If you're building house, okay, it's not enough just to have the contractors and the laborers show up. You have to have materials too. Otherwise, you know, they may have the energy to build this thing, but without the appropriate supplies, it's not going to happen. So think about it that way. If you've got the increased risk for burns, we need to make sure that we're storing up foods, or at least the ability to manufacture foods that are high in protein and also calorically dense. Okay, so they're very nutritious foods. Eggs are a great example of this. Okay. The third thing that I want to touch on here is cuts and lacerations for this reason right here, okay? People are going to be splitting wood, and this is covered, by the way, lest you fear. People are going to be splitting wood, and if you're not used to splitting wood, and also if your balance isn't necessarily great or your point and aim isn't so great, the likelihood for slicing yourself really good in the leg is fairly high. Another potential cause for this is people messing around with their chainsaws. Okay, a chainsaw is a great reason to have a tourniquet on you. If you are working with chainsaws, have a tourniquet on you, or for the love of Pete, wear Kevlar chaps, all right? The cutting and the laceration is something that not only can potentially cause death due to hemorrhaging, due to blood loss, but also, let's just say that it isn't something, you know, hardcore traumatic or hemorrhagic. Let's say that you whack some major muscle here in your leg, okay? It's gonna take a ton of bandages, right? Because you're going to use up a lot of your storage supply when you go through a major wound because it'll be bleeding. The bandage, the dressing is going to have to be changed regularly. Your risk for infection is high, all right? And even if you don't have an infection and you don't run through all of your supplies, which guaranteed you will, the risk for that person having long-term complications from loss of mobility is a fairly good one, okay? If I rear back and throw this thing down and sever a major tendon, or I cut a muscle, it's going to affect the person, okay? So the long and short of it with the cuts and lacerations, we need to, as best as possible, wear protective gear, personal protective equipment, when we're doing tasks that involve large blades or the risk for cutting or severing something, all right? So again, if you're going to be chopping wood, be careful. Be careful. If you're going to be using a chainsaw, wear Kevlar, all right? Wear the Kevlar chaps. I'll put a link in the description box below to my favorite set of Kevlar chaps because they protect the people in my life that I love. All right, Kevlar, Kevlar, Kevlar chaps, good thing. But also consider that eye injuries are going to be part of this too. And I've included the eye injuries in the cuts and lacerations because a lot of times if you're working with stuff, objects can fly up into the eye. Glass shards, metal shards, wood shard, all of it can fly up into the eye. So make sure when we're dealing with the cuts and lacerations, personal protective equipment is a really good thing to store, okay? Fourth, rashes. Monkey butt. Monkey butt. Okay, so people are going to be on their feet more. They're going to be walking back and forth more. They're going to be doing more manual tasks. Hygiene is probably not going to be as easily achievable as it once was. And to top it off, if you live in, I don't know, mid-Kentucky South, it gets just a wee bit sweltering sometimes during the summer. So walking around in humidity, not getting to wash and bathe every day, not having regular underwear changes is a great way to cause monkey butt. So rashes and monkey butt, that's one thing to consider. But also people are going to be out doing, again, more manual tasks. The risk for contact dermatitis, for basically touching something you're allergic to, poison oak, poison ivy, poison sumac, all of that risk goes way up when we're out and traipsing about in the woods more, okay? Store up toilet paper. It's a good thing. We don't want to be guessing as to which leaves are the ones that are problematic. That's my treatise on rashes. And then the last one is very important, falls, okay? There are 3 things that put people in nursing homes: falls, incontinence, and dementia. I shall repeat that. Falls, incontinence, and dementia, okay? Falls. You're going to be likely to fall if, number 1, you have a pre-existing condition that makes your gait uneven, unsteady. People who have balance deficits for a bunch of different reasons, and the elderly, okay? A lot of times you'll hear people, oh, she fell and broke her hip. A lot of old people actually have a fall as a result of the hip breaking because of weak bones, all right? The long and short of it, your elders, your people who have any balance discrepancies, proprioception, like seeing things, they're going to be at an increased risk for falling, especially if they're doing more manual tasks and being out and about more, okay? Throw rugs around the house, like the little runners on hardwood floors. Those things are disasters waiting to happen, especially among the elderly populations, okay? Those things cause so many falls each year, it ain't even funny. But also micro wheels, the Hot Wheels, kids' cars, kids leaving stuff around. Like, that's a great reason right there to teach your children responsibility and picking up after themselves, because son, if you left your Hot Wheels out, it could cause grandma to fall and break her hip, or break her hip then fall and die. So keeping things cleaned up, keeping your space neat, that's a good way to do this. But when you're looking at falls, guys, even if you don't break anything, you're looking at soft tissue damage, bruising. Storing up things like ibuprofen is helpful. I don't go into setting of bones. I don't mess around with that. I had a fun experience in Cambodia with a boy who fell out of a coconut tree that ended up in our group making a very long trip to a children's hospital. Okay guys, so those are the 5 injuries that I think are realistic to prep for here that are more likely to happen during a poop hits the fan. And again, they are sprains, burns, cuts / lacerations, rashes, and falls. And I hope it was helpful for y'all today. If you did enjoy the video today, please subscribe to me, Patriot Nurse. Also like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The whole class schedule. Okay, so here's the thing. I teach classes all around the country, all right? And if you think this is entertaining, just watching me on YouTube, just wait for class. It's a whole lot more fun. I do teach classes all around the country. We get you ready for medical disasters and everyday stuff too. Okay, how to take care of your family. And let me tell you guys something, with the way that our healthcare system is turning in this country, you're gonna need this, all right? And even if you come to class and it saves you one useless or unneeded trip to the emergency room, it paid for itself. All right, so check out the website, thepatriotnurse.com. Get yourself into a class today. We'd love to have you. I'd love to see you, interact with you. I have a great time with my students in class. And also like me on Facebook. I do a lot of interaction with folks there too. I hope it was helpful for y'all. And for now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off. And I will see you guys later. Bye.